Hey guys, tonight we pull back the curtain on a past that's a little less knights in shining armor and a lot more you're in big trouble. You know, when you think of the medieval period, your mind probably jumps to grand castles, epic battles, or maybe even those slightly ridiculous conical hats. But tucked away from the romanticized image of courtly love and jousting tournaments was a brutal reality: the slave market. Imagine a place where people weren't citizens with rights, but rather commodities with a price tag. You're standing there right now, not as an observer, but as a potential piece of merchandise. The air is thick with a strange mixture of dust, fear, and the smell of unwashed bodies. You probably won't survive a day here with your modern sensibilities intact, so let's try to get you ready. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're here, in the heart of some bustling, sun-baked market square, a place that feels a world away from the tidy history books. The noise is a constant, suffocating hum, the bleating of livestock, the haggling of merchants, the low murmur of terrified whispers. This isn't a place of stone castles and noble deeds, but of dirt, sweat, and desperation. Your feet, wrapped in what can only be described as rags, sink slightly into the dusty ground. The sun, a relentless white orb in a cloudless sky, bakes your skin. You can feel the weight of countless eyes on you, not in curiosity, but in evaluation. You are a puzzle to be solved, a tool to be used. They're sizing you up, guessing at your age, your strength, your potential for obedience. You see people from all walks of life here, not just the unfortunate souls captured in raids, but also debtors, criminals, and sometimes even children sold by their own impoverished parents. It's a cruel testament to the economic realities of the era. Let's talk about a core historical fact. Slavery was a widespread and accepted institution throughout the medieval world. From Viking raiders selling captured Saxons to the bustling slave markets of the Islamic Golden Age, it wasn't an anomaly, it was an integral part of the global economy. Historians still argue whether the transition from Roman chattel slavery to medieval serfdom was a form of progress or simply a different flavor of subjugation. But for you, standing here, that's a pretty academic debate. Right now, your life isn't a historical footnote, it's a terrifying present. You're just a small part of a vast, interconnected network of human trade that spanned continents. Your first thought is probably, how did I even get here? And that's a good question. The answer is likely a forced march that lasted for weeks, maybe months. You were probably tied to a long rope, along with dozens of others, a human chain pulled along by a mounted slaver. The journey was a test of endurance you barely passed. There was no clean water, no rest for the weary, and the food was just enough to keep you from dying. People fell sick and were left behind. The strong survived, and here you are. Here's a quirky tidbit you probably wouldn't guess. In some medieval cultures, the price of a slave was literally measured in cattle. A strong, able-bodied man might fetch a handful of cows, while a skilled craftsman could be worth a small herd. It's a bizarre and deeply dehumanizing way to quantify a human life, but it highlights the simple, agrarian economics that underpinned the system. It's the kind of thing that makes your brain short-circuit a little. You're a person, with thoughts and dreams and fears, and your worth is being calculated against a cow that chews its cud in a nearby pen. A woman standing next to you, a woman whose face is etched with a sorrow you can't even begin to comprehend, catches your eye. She looks at you, a complete stranger, and gives a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head. It's a wordless warning, a tiny bit of humanity in a place that has none. It's a reminder that beneath the dust and the grime and the terror, there are still people, just like you, who are caught in this nightmare. You feel a pang of something close to empathy, and you quickly push it away. Emotions are a luxury you can't afford here. They'll only make you weak, and weakness is something you definitely can't have. You need to become a stone, a piece of wood, anything that can't feel the crushing weight of what's happening. But it's hard. You can still hear the frantic, quiet pleas of a small child somewhere in the distance, a sound that cuts through the market noise like a knife. You close your eyes for a moment, trying to block it out, but it's no use. The sound and the feeling are already a part of you. The journey wasn't just physical, it was a slow, deliberate dismantling of your identity. You didn't walk this path alone, but in a line of the condemned, tied together with heavy rope or iron collars. The manacle chafed your wrist, a constant, low-grade reminder of your new reality. Every step was a negotiation with pain, every sunrise a quiet terror. You were a spectacle, an object of curiosity and disdain for the villagers you passed. They pointed, whispered, and some even threw stones. You learned quickly to keep your head down and your eyes fixed on the dirty heels of the person in front of you. This wasn't a road to a destination, it was a path to a new, unrecognizable self. Your old life, the one with comfortable chairs and hot showers and predictable meals, feels like a dream. It's so far away it might as well have never happened at all. You're now huddled in a cramped, stinking pen with dozens of other people. The air is thick with the scent of unwashed bodies, human waste, and fear a cocktail so potent it makes your stomach churn. You can hear the low, mournful whimpering of a child and the gruff commands of the guards. They're not unkind, not exactly. They're simply indifferent, seeing you all as a herd of animals to be managed. This pen, a makeshift holding area, is the last stop before the auction block. It's where you're inspected, prodded, and made ready for sale. You see a man with a missing tooth and a cruel grin looking over the group, his eyes lingering on the younger, stronger individuals. He's the dealer, the one who purchased you from the raiders. To him, you're just stock, and he's calculating his potential profit, a grotesque math problem that uses human lives as variables. This journey is a historical reality. The movement of slaves across vast distances was a staple of the medieval world, from the Arab slave trade that funneled people from sub-Saharan Africa to the Middle East, to the Viking trade routes that stretched from Scandinavia to the Byzantine Empire. These were not short trips. They were grueling, life-altering marches that saw countless people perish along the way from disease, malnutrition, or simple exhaustion. It's a sobering thought that the ground beneath you is likely soaked with the stories of those who didn't make it this far. Historians still argue whether the scale of the trans-Saharan slave trade was larger than the later transatlantic trade, but what is clear is that the sheer numbers were staggering. A quirky detail that you might find unsettling is the use of slave collars. In some regions, these were more than just a means of restraint. They were often inscribed with a small metal plate detailing the slave's name, their owner, and their place of origin. This served both as a form of identification and a potent symbol of their lack of freedom. It's a bit like a medieval dog tag, except for humans. Imagine wearing a permanent physical declaration of your status as property. It's the kind of thing that makes you want to scratch your skin off. You watch as an older man is pulled from the group. His face is a roadmap of wrinkles and his body is thin, weakened by the journey. A potential buyer, a man in fine wool clothing and a heavy gold ring, pokes and prods him like he's checking the ripeness of a melon. The old man doesn't resist. He just stares ahead, his eyes empty. The buyer shakes his head, scoffs, and walks away. The old man is shoved back into the pen, his value deemed too low. You understand in that moment that this is the first of many judgments, the first of many times you'll be weighed, measured, and found wanting. Or perhaps, found useful. That's a different kind of terror. To be seen as a tool, not a person. To have your worth defined by the strength of your back, the thickness of your calluses, or the supposed beauty of your face. It's a terrifying equation, and you don't get to see the variables before the calculation is made. The worst part is the silence. The old man doesn't cry out. He doesn't beg. He just returns to his spot, defeated, a ghost in a pen full of living bodies. It's a stark, brutal lesson that you absorb with every trembling cell in your body. This is a place where hope goes to die. The immediate assault on your senses is overwhelming, a cacophony of fear and degradation. The air, already thick with the dust and stench from the journey, is now punctuated by the sharp, metallic smell of fresh sweat and the sour odor of fear. You can hear the low, guttural cries of a man being whipped in a distant corner, a sound that sends a shiver down your spine and tells you everything you need to know about this place without a single word being spoken. The guards, with their thick leather jerkins and calloused hands, move with a casual indifference that's more terrifying than outright cruelty. They've seen it all before, 1,000 times over, and your terror is just part of the background noise. This place isn't just a market, it's a theatre of human misery, and you've just been pushed onto the stage. You notice the variety of people around you. Not all of them look like you, or speak the same language. You see a man with dark, finely braided hair and intricate tattoos, a woman with a child clinging to her skirt, and a young boy with wide, terrified eyes. They are all here for different reasons, captured from different places, but they are all united by the same terrible fate. The diversity of the slave trade was a historical constant. In the Mediterranean, for example, the markets of cities like Venice and Genoa traded people from all over Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. This wasn't just a localized tragedy, it was a global enterprise, driven by the demand for labor and the constant churn of war and conquest. For you, this means your fellow captives might not even be able to understand your quiet pleas, and you're forced to communicate through the universal language of shared dread. A quirky detail that you find particularly grim is the practice of oiling slaves. Before the auction, you might be covered in oil or fat, not for comfort, but to make your skin look healthier, to hide any blemishes or signs of malnourishment. It's a macabre form of product packaging designed to fetch a higher price from a prospective buyer. Imagine that for a second. You're being prepped for sale like a piece of meat, polished and presented to hide the signs of your suffering. It's a deeply humiliating and dehumanizing act, turning your body into an object to be admired and then owned. Historians still argue whether the practice of branding was more for identification or as a form of permanent psychological subjugation. For you, it's all the same, a brutal, indelible mark of your new status. You see a group of potential buyers walking through the pens. They are dressed in expensive fabrics, their faces a mixture of cold calculation and casual curiosity. They aren't seeing you as a human being with a story. They're seeing a potential field hand, a servant, or perhaps a skilled artisan. They're looking for signs of strength, resilience, and obedience. You try to straighten your shoulders, to look strong, but it's hard to muster any sense of dignity when you're standing in a pile of your own filth. You remember the look in your father's eyes when he was proud of you, and it feels like a memory from another lifetime, a beautiful ghost that haunts your present. You try to hold on to it, but it's slipping away, replaced by the gnawing, all-consuming fear that is your new constant companion. Your mind races. What do they want? Are they looking for strength? Are they looking for youth? Is your pale skin a mark of distinction or a sign of weakness? You realize you have no control over this. Your fate is in the hands of strangers who see you as little more than a tool. This is the hardest part to swallow. Your agency has been completely stripped away. There is no negotiating, no pleading your case, no appeal to a higher authority. You are simply a thing, and things do not have rights. You see another captive, a young woman, trying to hide a visible scar on her arm. She's desperately trying to make herself more appealing, to hide a defect that might lower her price. You understand her now. This is a game you have to play, even though the rules are stacked against you and the prize is just a different kind of imprisonment. You have to try and make yourself valuable enough to survive, but not so valuable that you become a prize for a truly cruel master. It's a razor's edge you're walking, and you haven't even been sold yet. Now comes the most invasive part of your ordeal. You're pulled from the pen and led into a smaller, covered area, a makeshift tent where a man with surprisingly clean hands and a cold, professional demeanor awaits. He is a physician of sorts, a man hired to vet the merchandise. Your clothes, such as they are stripped away, and you stand naked and exposed. There's no hint of shame in his eyes, only a clinical detachment that's far more unsettling than any leering gaze. He prods at your muscles, checks your teeth, and examines your limbs for any sign of past injury. Your physical health is not a matter of well-being, it's a data point, a factor in a price calculation. You are a biological machine being assessed for its potential utility. He presses his fingers into the small of your back, checking the integrity of your spine, and you have to fight the urge to flinch. He checks your hands for calluses that might indicate a history of hard labor or a lack thereof, which could suggest a more docile, less used servant. You feel a strange kind of pride and shame at the same time. Pride that your body is holding up, that the long march hasn't completely broken you, and shame at the thought that this is the only thing that matters now. The doctor turns your head and looks into your eyes, not for a moment of human connection, but to check for signs of jaundice or other illnesses. He notes a small scar on your knee, a remnant of a childhood fall, and you see him make a mental note, a possible flaw that could lower your value. This kind of thorough physical inspection was a standard part of the slave trading process throughout the medieval world. From the great markets of Baghdad to the bustling ports of the Black Sea, buyers needed to be assured of their purchase's quality. They were, after all, making a significant investment. A sickly slave was a liability. A strong, healthy one was a prized asset. Historians still argue whether the medical knowledge of these examiners was more folklore than science, but their methods were certainly effective enough to spot a weak or ailing individual. For you, the experience is a brutal lesson in the objectification of the human body. A quirky detail from some slave markets is that the examiner might also check your hands for signs of fine work, such as soft palms and uncalloused fingers, to determine if you had a background as a scribe, a musician, or some other specialized servant. This could drastically increase your price. A slave who could read and write was a rare commodity. So, for a brief, terrifying moment, you wonder if your knowledge of history, or your ability to form a coherent sentence, could be a blessing or a curse. Would a master value your mind, or would they see it as a potential source of rebellion? A dangerous thing to have in a person who is supposed to be nothing more than property. It's a frightening thought, and you quickly try to clear your mind of anything that might give you away. The doctor finishes his examination and grunts, a sound of professional satisfaction, before turning to the guard and speaking in a language you can't understand. You are given a rough garment, a simple tunic of coarse wool, and led back to the pens. You feel a profound sense of relief to be out of the tent, but it is quickly replaced by a new kind of dread. You've been catalogued, assessed, and now you're ready for sale. The final judgment is about to be rendered. You look around at the others, and you realize that they've all been through the same process. Their faces are a mixture of humiliation and resignation. One man, a tall, imposing figure who looks like he could snap your neck with his bare hands, is weeping quietly, a silent testament to the psychological damage this process has inflicted. You realize that strength and stoicism are no match for this kind of dehumanization. It breaks everyone, sooner or later. The only question left is when it will break you. You're back in the pen, but something has changed. Before, you were just a collection of frightened people. Now, you've been categorized. You start to notice the subtle differences in how people are treated, how they're looked at. A younger, stronger man is kept in a separate group, his hands tied with a slightly more expensive rope. A woman with delicate features and pale skin is separated and given a place closer to the shade. You realize that you're not just a commodity, you're a product with different features and price points. You're a type of slave now, and you're beginning to understand the strange, unspoken hierarchy of this world. There were many different types of slaves in the medieval era, and your value, and therefore your fate, depended on which category you fell into. There were the field slaves, destined for back-breaking agricultural labor. These were often the cheapest, and their lives were the most brutal. Then you had the domestic slaves, who worked in households. They might have better living conditions, but they were subjected to the whims of their masters and mistresses. with no escape from their constant scrutiny. Higher still were the skilled slaves, artisans, scribes, musicians, and craftsmen. They were rare and expensive, and their talents could sometimes afford them a degree of protection, or at least a different kind of servitude. This was a core historical fact of medieval society, a nuanced system of human value that was as intricate as it was cruel. Historians still argue whether skilled slaves had more or less autonomy than their free counterparts, given that their specialized skills often made them indispensable to their masters. A quirky detail that you stumble upon is the practice of tasting slaves. In some marketplaces, particularly those in the Middle East, a potential buyer might bring a trusted servant or a professional taster to assess the slave's temperament and demeanor. They might ask you a series of questions, or simply observe how you interact with others. It's a bizarre and deeply dehumanizing process, as if they were trying to determine if you had the right flavor of subservience. You recall the woman who gave you the silent warning earlier, and you wonder if she was a taster or just a fellow prisoner with a kind heart. It's a terrifying thought that your very essence could be judged and priced in such a detached manner. As you look around, you see another group of slaves being prepared for a different kind of sale. They're being dressed in brightly colored silks, their hair is being combed and oiled, and they're being given small amounts of food and water. These are the luxury slaves, the ones destined for the harems and royal courts. Their fate, while perhaps less physically demanding than a field slave's, is a different kind of nightmare. They are objects of pleasure and prestige, their lives entirely defined by their ability to please their owners. You realize that there is no good option here. There is only a series of bad ones, each with its own unique flavor of suffering. The field slave's body breaks, the domestic slave's spirit breaks, and the luxury slave's humanity breaks. You hear the clang of a bell, a sharp metallic sound that slices through the market's hum. The auction is about to begin. Your heart pounds a frantic rhythm against your ribs. You try to take a deep breath, to steady yourself, but the air feels too thin, too full of dread. You know that soon you will be a name on a list, a number on a ledger, a price in a transaction. Your past, your hopes, your fears, they all become irrelevant. Your identity, a thing you once held so dear, is about to be sold. You recall a time when you worried about things like a missed appointment or a late bill, and you feel a strange sense of fondness for that distant, trivial anxiety. Now, your only worry is whether you'll be bought by a kind master or a cruel one, a question to which you will soon have an answer. The psychological toll is the heaviest burden you carry. You're no longer a person with hopes and dreams, but a set of physical attributes and skills. This transformation from a thinking, feeling human to an inanimate object for sale is a profound and deeply unsettling experience. Your mind, a place that once held memories of laughter and love, is now a cage for a single, gnawing thought: survival. You're constantly evaluating your surroundings, sizing up the guards, and trying to read the expressions of the potential buyers. Every glance, every gesture, every whisper is a potential clue to your fate. You are a prisoner in your own head, and the jailer is your own frantic anxiety. You feel a sense of profound detachment from your own body. It's no longer yours in the way you understood it. It's a vessel, a tool to be used, and its value is determined by people who don't know your name or your story. You start to see yourself the way they see you, as a strong back for labor, a pair of hands for a craft, or a pretty face for a master's home. This is a deliberate process of dehumanization, not just for the buyers, but for you. To survive, you must try to detach from your old self, to become the object they want you to be. It's a defense mechanism, a way to insulate your inner self from the brutal reality of your situation. But it's a dangerous game, because you risk losing yourself entirely in the process. This psychological stripping away of identity was a constant and terrible reality for slaves throughout the medieval world. The very act of being sold was a formal declaration that your personhood had been revoked. The ancient Romans, for example, referred to slaves as servi, a term that implied a lack of legal standing and social recognition. This was a core historical fact. You were a piece of property, not a member of society. Historians still argue whether some slaves were able to maintain a sense of internal identity through faith or community, or if the psychological damage was too profound to overcome. You look at the others in the pen, and you see their different ways of coping. Some stare blankly into space, having already retreated into the sanctuary of their own minds. Others whisper prayers under their breath, a fragile lifeline to a God who feels a million miles away. A quirky detail that you notice is the way the guards talk about you and the others. They don't use your names or even he or she. They refer to you as stock, the new batch, or with dehumanizing collective terms. It's a subtle but powerful way to reinforce your status as an object. It's a small detail, but it speaks volumes about the mindset of the people who run this market. They have to see you as less than human to do what they do, and their language is a tool for maintaining that view. You remember a joke you once heard about a clumsy waiter, and for a fleeting second, you wonder if you'll be as good as a domestic servant. The absurdity of the thought almost makes you laugh, but the sound dies in your throat. This isn't a joke. This is your life. You hear a commotion as a group of people are pulled from the pen. They are younger and healthier looking than you. They're being led toward the auction block. Your heart rate accelerates. It's starting. The moment of truth. You watch them go. A small, sad procession of human beings about to have their fates sealed. You feel a strange mixture of relief that it's not you, and a deep, all-consuming dread that it will be soon. The psychological gymnastics of this place are exhausting. You have to constantly manage a flood of emotions. Fear, anger, despair, and a flickering, almost imperceptible flicker of hope. You try to hold on to that flicker, to nurture it, but it feels like a small candle in a terrible storm. You close your eyes for a moment, and in the darkness behind your eyelids, you try to remember the person you used to be. You try to hold on to the image, the memory, a small piece of yourself that hasn't been sold yet. Your first day as a slave, or what's left of it, is a harsh, jarring introduction to your new reality. The auction is over, but that doesn't mean your ordeal is. It's just beginning. You're now the property of a man with a stern face and a beard streaked with grey. He bought you for a fair price, or so the auctioneer said, a price that feels both astronomical and crushingly cheap. You're no longer in the dirty, chaotic market, but in the sprawling courtyard of your new master's estate. The air here is cleaner, but it's thick with a different kind of tension. This is where you'll learn the rules, and you understand, without a single word being spoken, that breaking them will be a very bad idea. You are not alone. There are other slaves here, men and women of all ages, going about their daily tasks with a quiet, practiced efficiency. They don't look at you with sympathy, but with a detached curiosity. You're the new one, the outsider. You'll have to find your place in this new hierarchy, a delicate dance of unspoken rules and power dynamics. The head servant, a woman with eyes that seem to see everything, gives you a look that says, "I've seen 100 like you come and go. Don't cause trouble." You understand. You're not a person to her yet, just a new problem to manage. This immediate induction into a new life was a core historical fact of medieval slavery. There was no gentle transition. You were bought, and your new life began immediately. The master needed labor, and you were that labor. Your old life, your old skills, your old habits, they were all irrelevant. You were expected to adapt and learn quickly, or suffer the consequences. Historians still argue whether the transition was more or less difficult for slaves who had been freeborn versus those who had grown up in a state of servitude. But for you, the shock is all-consuming. Everything you knew is gone, replaced by a terrifying uncertainty. A quirky detail that you notice is the way the other slaves communicate with each other. They use a kind of coded language, a mixture of glances, gestures, and abbreviated phrases. It's a secret language that you are not privy to, a way for them to express their frustrations and fears without being understood by their masters. It's a lifeline, a way to maintain a small bit of autonomy in a world that has taken everything else. You feel a pang of longing to be part of that community, to understand their jokes and their sorrows, but you're an outsider. You're the new kid on the block, and you have to prove yourself before you can be trusted. Your first task is simple, or so it seems. You are given a broom and told, in a series of gruff commands and hand gestures, to sweep the courtyard. The broom is heavy, and your hands are soft from a life of not sweeping. You struggle with it, and you can feel the head servant's eyes on you, her silent judgment a weight on your shoulders. You're clumsy and slow, and the courtyard seems impossibly large. You feel a wave of frustration, a flash of anger at the injustice of it all, but you push it down. You know that anger is a luxury you can't afford. It's a weakness that will only get you into more trouble. So you sweep, and you sweep, and you sweep, your back aching, and your mind a blank slate of exhaustion. The sun beats down on your head, and the dust swirls around you, a small, swirling representation of your new life. You are a ghost, a shadow, a thing with a broom, and you are terrified. But you are also alive, and for now, that's all that matters. The auction block is not what you imagined. It's not a grand stage, but a simple wooden platform, elevated just enough for the buyers to get a good look at the merchandise. You're pushed onto it, your legs trembling slightly. The sun, once again, is a hot, merciless spotlight. You can feel the rough-hewn wood of the platform beneath your bare feet, a constant, uncomfortable reality. The crowd before you is a sea of faces, a mix of the wealthy and the middling, all with the same cold, calculating look in their eyes. They aren't seeing you as a human. They're seeing a potential investment, a tool, a piece of property. The air is filled with the scent of roasted meat from a nearby vendor, an ironic smell that makes your stomach ache with a hunger you've learned to ignore. The auctioneer is a man with a booming voice and a flair for the dramatic. He stands beside you, a grotesque ringmaster in this circus of human misery. He begins to shout out your attributes, a stream of dehumanizing bullet points. He mentions your age, your apparent health, the strength of your build, and the lack of visible scars. He's a salesman, and you're his product. You feel a profound sense of shame, as if you're a horse being sold at a livestock fair. Every word he says is another blow to your dignity, another nail in the coffin of your old identity. He's a storyteller, weaving a narrative of your strength and potential, but the story is a lie. The only truth is that you are no longer your own. This public display and sale of human beings was a common practice throughout the medieval world. From the slave markets of Baghdad to the fairs in Europe, a public auction was the most common method of transferring ownership. This was a core historical fact, and the pomp and circumstance of the auction served to legitimize the process in the eyes of the community. It was a public declaration that the person being sold had no rights, and that their fate was now in the hands of their new master. Historians still argue whether the spectacle of the auction was more for the buyer's entertainment or a necessary part of the legal process of sale, but for you, it is a humiliation of the highest order. A quirky detail about some of these auctions is that they didn't always use money. In some regions, a buyer might offer goods, land, or even other slaves in exchange for a desirable captive. It was a bizarre kind of medieval bartering system, where a person's worth was measured not in coins, but in cows, sacks of grain, or even another person. Imagine that for a second. Your life, your future, is being traded for a few chickens or a small patch of land. It's a level of detachment that's hard to comprehend. The bidding starts. You hear the shouts of numbers, a quick-fire exchange of worth. The price goes up, and you feel a strange mix of emotions. A part of you is horrified that your life is being reduced to a number. Another, more primal part, is hoping the number goes higher, because you've learned that a more valuable slave might be treated slightly better. It's a terrible gamble, and you have no say in the outcome. You watch the faces in the crowd, trying to find a glimmer of kindness, a hint of a good master, but there is nothing, just a sea of cold, calculating eyes. You are just a number, a price, a piece of property, and in a moment, your fate will be sealed, and your new life will begin. It's a moment of truth, and you feel a single tear trace a path down your dusty cheek. You quickly wipe it away. Tears are a sign of weakness, and weakness is something you definitely can't afford. The auctioneer, that slick ringmaster of human misery, is more than just a man with a loud voice. He's a broker, a professional deal closer, and a master manipulator. He's the one who stands between you and the buyer, a grotesque middleman who profits from your tragedy. His voice rises and falls with a practiced cadence, painting a picture of your strength and value. He's not just selling a person, he's selling a promise of a strong back, of a loyal servant, of a future filled with labor and obedience. He knows how to read the room, how to play on the greed and ambitions of the buyers. He's a salesman in the most literal sense, and his product is you. He'll use every trick in the book. He might tell a little lie, a small embellishment about your non-existent skills or your supposed docile nature. He might make a joke at your expense, a brief, sharp jab that gets a laugh from the crowd and makes you feel even more like an object. He knows that a little bit of humor can break the tension and make the buyers feel more comfortable with their terrible purchase. He's not a monster in the classic sense. He's a professional. He's just doing his job, and that professional detachment is far more terrifying than any overt cruelty. He's just a man trying to make a living, and your life is the currency he uses. This role of the auctioneer and broker was a fundamental part of the medieval slave trade. From the Byzantine Empire to the markets of the Middle East, a dedicated class of brokers, often known as dalal or kafale, facilitated these transactions. This was a core historical fact. These were not casual trades, but carefully managed business dealings. These brokers often specialized in different types of slaves, with some dealing in skilled artisans and others in brute labor. Historians still argue whether these brokers were considered socially acceptable or were viewed as a necessary but morally questionable part of the commercial class. For you, he's just a man who holds your fate in his loud, booming hands. A quirky detail that you might find unsettling is the use of proxy bidding. A wealthy buyer who didn't want to be seen at a public auction might send a trusted servant or a broker to bid on their behalf. The broker would be given a set amount of money and a list of desired attributes, and they would do their best to purchase a suitable slave without their master ever having to set foot in the market. It's a strange, almost impersonal way to buy a human being, as if you're a piece of furniture being bought by a decorator. You wonder if your new master is one of these people, a ghost in the crowd who will never know your face. The auctioneer points to a man in the crowd, a man with a gold ring on his finger and a severe expression. He's your new master. The auctioneer gives him a small, respectful bow and then turns his attention to the next person on the block. The entire process, which felt like an eternity, is over in a matter of minutes. You are now the property of a stranger, a man who knows nothing about you except your price. You are led off the block, your legs still shaky from the ordeal. The world around you, the noise, the smells, the faces, they all seem to recede into a blurry, indistinct background. Your old life is officially over, and your new one of servitude and uncertainty, has just begun. The only thing you know for sure is that you are no longer your own. The final price is a number, a cold, hard sum that defines your worth in a world where you have none. You're no longer a person. You're a line on a ledger, a financial transaction. The price is shouted out, and it's a blur of foreign words, but you understand the weight of it. It's a price that would have bought a small farm, a herd of goats, or a year's worth of grain. And it bought you. This is the moment your life is converted into currency, a grotesque and final declaration of your new status as property. The negotiation is over, the deal is struck, and you are led away from the auction block, a new shadow following your new master. You're now in the hands of a man you know nothing about. You don't know his name, his profession, or his temperament. The man, a severe-looking figure in fine wool, leads you away from the noise and chaos of the market. You follow him, a silent, obedient shadow. Your mind is a whirlwind of questions and fears. Will he be a cruel master or a benevolent one? Will you be put to work in the fields or in his home? Will you be fed, or will you starve? You have no way of knowing. Your future is a blank page, and your new master holds the pen. This moment, the transition from being a piece of merchandise to a servant in a new household, is perhaps the most terrifying part of the ordeal. It's the moment the nightmare becomes real. This finality of the sale was a core historical fact. Once the price was agreed upon, the slave was legally the property of the buyer. The contract of sale, a simple piece of parchment or even a verbal agreement, was all that was needed. There was no appeal, no recourse, no way to undo the transaction. Historians still argue whether the final price of a slave was more a reflection of the slave's physical attributes or the economic prosperity of the region. For you, the price is just a number that has sealed your fate, a number you will likely never know. A quirky detail that you might find interesting is that sometimes, in order to get a better price, a slave broker might try to sell a family unit together. A master might be willing to pay a premium for a mother and her children, as it was believed that a family unit would be more docile and less likely to try and escape. It's a strange and twisted form of compassion, where the bonds of family are used as a selling point. You think of the other captives you saw, the mother with her child, and you hope, with a small, desperate hope, that they were sold together, that they weren't separated, because that, you realize, might be a fate even worse than your own. You're led through the crowded streets, a silent procession of two. The city is a vibrant, bustling place, full of life and laughter and commerce. But for you, it feels like a ghost town. The people you pass are oblivious to your plight. They see a master and his new servant, a common sight in this world. They don't see the terror in your eyes, the frantic pounding of your heart, or the death of your old life. You are a ghost, a shadow, a silent passenger in a world that has no place for you. You are a piece of property, a financial asset, and you are completely and utterly alone. Your mind, which was once a place of memories and dreams, is now a repository of a single terrible fact. You have been sold. Your first master's home is not the grand, sprawling castle from a storybook, but a solid, two-story stone house that exudes a kind of prosperous austerity. The courtyard, unlike the dusty market, is clean and orderly. There are other servants bustling about, their movements practiced and efficient. You are led through a heavy wooden door into a world of polished floors and whitewashed walls. The air is filled with the smell of wood smoke and roasting meat, a scent that is both comforting and terrifying. This is your new home, a place of safety and danger, a place where you will live, but not be free. You are taken to the head servant, the woman with the all-seeing eyes from before. Her name, you learn, is Alara. She is the gatekeeper of this new world. She sizes you up with a cold, professional gaze, and then, in a language of grunts and pointed fingers, she gives you your first instructions. You are to be a house servant, a position that is better than the fields but no less demanding. You will sweep, carry water, and help in the kitchens. Your place, she makes clear, is at the bottom of the household hierarchy. This is your new life, and you will learn its rules, or you will suffer. This immediate immersion into a new household was a core historical fact of medieval slavery. There was no orientation, no training period. You were expected to learn by doing, and your mistakes would not be met with kindness. The hierarchy of a household, from the head servant to the kitchen boy, was a complex and rigid system. Every person had their place, and you, the new slave, were at the very bottom. Historians still argue whether the loyalty of household servants was more to their master or to the other servants, but for you, the only thing that matters is survival. A quirky detail about some of these households is that slaves were sometimes given a new name upon purchase. It was a symbolic gesture, a way of severing their ties to their old life and marking them as the property of their new master. A man named Thomas might become grey for his hair, or a woman named Sarah might become Rose for her complexion. It was a small but profound act of dehumanization, a final nail in the coffin of your old identity. You are given a new name, one you don't even understand, and you are told to answer to it. It's a strange feeling, to hear a new name and realize that it's you they're talking about. You try to say it out loud, but the sound feels alien in your mouth. You are given a small, cramped space in the servants' quarters, a room you will share with two other slaves. The room is Spartan, with a straw pallet on the floor and a thin wool blanket. It's a far cry from your old life, but it's a roof over your head. You meet your new roommates, a quiet woman who is much older than you, and a young boy who looks to be no more than 10. They don't speak to you, but their eyes hold a world of shared misery. You are all in the same boat, a sinking one. Your first meal is a bowl of thin stew and a crust of bread, a meager but welcome offering. You eat it in silence, listening to the quiet murmur of the other servants. You are no longer in the market, but you are still a prisoner. Your new life has begun, and it is a life of silence, labor, and fear. The most immediate, soul-crushing barrier you face isn't physical labor or the cold stare of your master. It's the language. The words they speak are a jumble of foreign sounds, a rapid-fire assault on your ears that leaves you feeling more isolated than ever. You can't understand the head servant's commands, the quiet whispers of the other slaves, or the casual conversations of your master and his family. You're living in a world of gibberish, a world where your most basic form of communication has been taken away from you. You're forced to rely on gestures, on pointed fingers, and on a constant, gut-wrenching game of charades. This is your new reality, a life lived in silence and confusion. You try to mimic the other slaves, to watch their movements and guess at their purpose. When the head servant points to a stack of firewood, you understand. When she points to a bucket and a well, you understand. But when she says something to you, a stream of what you can only assume are instructions, you just stare blankly, a look of desperate confusion on your face. You see her frustration, a flicker of irritation that she quickly suppresses. She just points again, more forcefully this time, and you scramble to obey. This is a terrifying kind of helplessness, a feeling you've never known before. You can't ask for help, you can't express a thought, and you can't defend yourself if you're accused of a mistake you didn't even know you were making. This profound language barrier was a common reality for slaves in the medieval world, especially those taken from distant lands. This was a core historical fact. Slave markets were a melting pot of different nationalities and tongues, and a new slave was often completely unable to communicate with their captors or their fellow slaves. Historians still argue whether this language barrier was an intentional tool of control to prevent rebellion or simply an unfortunate side effect of a global slave trade. For you, it's a constant, low-grade torture. One fascinating aspect of the communication struggles was how some slaves and masters developed a kind of pidgin language, a simplified mix of both their tongues, just to get by. It wasn't a proper language, but a collection of simple words and gestures that allowed for basic communication. You try to pick up on these small clues, to learn the one or two words that are repeated most often. You hear the word for water and the word for food, and you cling to them like a drowning man to a piece of driftwood. They are the only words you know, and they are your only hope of survival. You see a young boy, a house slave who looks to be your age, watching you with a kind of quiet pity. He sees your struggle, your frantic attempts to understand. He doesn't say anything, but he gives you a small, encouraging nod. It's a tiny act of kindness, a glimmer of empathy in a world that seems to have none. You feel a wave of gratitude wash over you, a feeling so intense it almost brings you to tears. But you quickly suppress it. You are a slave. You have no friends here. You are completely and utterly alone. You turn back to your task, trying to put that tiny moment of human connection out of your mind. It's a dangerous thing to hope for, and hope is something you can no longer afford. Your days are no longer defined by your own desires, but by the relentless, monotonous rhythm of the household. You wake at the first light, your body aching from a night on a thin straw pallet. Your clothes are the same coarse wool tunic you were given, and they're starting to smell of sweat and dust. Your first task is to fetch water from the well, a heavy bucket that digs into your soft hands. You struggle with it, but you learn quickly that there's no room for weakness here. You carry the water back, your back protesting with every step, and you pour it into a large stone basin for the master's family. After that, it's a blur of endless chores. You sweep the floors with a heavy broom, your arms and shoulders screaming in protest. You help in the kitchen, a hot, chaotic space filled with the sounds of chopping and the smell of spices. You carry firewood, scrub pots, and wash clothes in a large wooden tub. There's no variety, no chance for rest. The work is physically demanding and mentally draining. Your mind, once full of thoughts and ideas, is now a blank slate, focused on the next task, and the next, and the next. You are a human automaton, a cog in a machine that doesn't care if you're tired, or hungry, or sad. This unceasing daily grind was the harsh reality for the majority of domestic slaves in the medieval world. Their lives were a constant cycle of labor, from dawn to dusk. This was a core historical fact. The household ran on their labor, and there was no such thing as a day off. Historians still argue whether the physical demands of household servitude were more or less taxing than agricultural labor. But for you, the endless monotony of the chores is a special kind of torment. You yearn for a single moment of quiet, a single moment of rest, but there is none. Another insight into the lives of these servants is how they dealt with the simple act of eating. You are fed, but not well. Your food is the scraps, the leftovers, a thin stew or a piece of stale bread. You eat in a corner, away from the master's family, a silent testament to your place in the household. It's a meal of survival, not pleasure, a way to keep your body working for another day. You learn to eat quickly, to swallow your pride along with your meager portion. You are a ghost, a silent figure who moves through the household, a part of the scenery that no one really sees. You see a young woman, another house servant, carrying a large silver platter of roasted meat to the master's dining room. Her face is blank, her movements practiced. She is a part of the household, a well-oiled machine, and you realize that's what you are destined to become, a person without a name, a life without a story. You feel a pang of fear, a primal terror that you will lose yourself completely in this endless cycle of labor. You remember the person you were, the person who had dreams and ambitions, and you try to hold on to that memory, to keep it safe in a small, hidden corner of your mind. But it's getting harder. The daily grind is a relentless eraser, and it's slowly, surely wiping you away. You're a new piece on a very old chessboard. The household is a complex web of relationships and unspoken rules, and you are at the bottom of the pile. There's a distinct hierarchy among the servants, a social order that is both rigid and brutal. At the top is the head servant, Ilara, who holds a significant amount of power. She is the master's eyes and ears, and her word is law in the kitchen and the servants' quarters. Below her are the other, more established house servants, who have been here for years and have a kind of seniority. And at the bottom, a new, nameless ghost, is you. You quickly learn that a mistake made by one of the senior servants will likely be blamed on you. It's a way for them to protect themselves, to shift the blame to the weakest link. You have to be constantly vigilant, watching for mistakes you didn't make and anticipating commands you didn't hear. You feel a sense of profound loneliness, a feeling that you have no allies, no one who will stand up for you. This is a cruel lesson in survival, a lesson that teaches you to trust no one and to be constantly on guard. Your old life, with its friendships and its social safety nets, feels a million miles away. This social structure was a core historical fact of medieval households. The hierarchy among slaves and servants was a well-established and often brutal reality. This was a form of control, a way to keep the servants from forming a united front, and to keep them focused on their own survival rather than on a shared rebellion. Historians still argue whether the cruelty of the head servant was a reflection of the master's temperament or a necessary evil to maintain order and discipline in a large household. For you, Ilara is a terrifying figure of authority, a woman who holds your fate in her hands with a single, sharp word. A more humanizing observation is how some of the younger servants, those who were not yet completely hardened by their lot, might show you a small, clandestine kindness. A young kitchen boy might slip you an extra piece of bread when no one is looking, or a young girl might give you a small nod of solidarity. These are fleeting moments, small sparks of light in an otherwise dark world, but they are enough to remind you that you are still human. You cling to these moments, these small secret acts of rebellion, as a way to maintain a small bit of your humanity. You're sweeping the master's study, a room filled with heavy books and a large carved desk. You're careful, trying not to disturb anything. The master is sitting at his desk, his back to you, writing in a large ledger. He doesn't look at you, doesn't acknowledge your presence. You are a ghost, a thing that cleans and polishes. You feel a wave of intense fear, a primal terror that you are completely and utterly at his mercy. He could do anything to you, and no one would ever know. The silence in the room is heavy, a suffocating blanket of dread. You sweep, your movements slow and deliberate, and you try to make yourself as small and as invisible as possible. You are a shadow in his home, and you pray that you will stay that way. The threat of punishment is a constant, suffocating cloud hanging over your head. It's not an eventuality, it's an inevitability. A dropped plate, a forgotten task, a moment of slow movement, any of these minor mistakes could lead to a brutal and swift correction. The punishments aren't just physical, they're psychological. They're designed to break your will, to teach you that your body and your mind are no longer your own. You see a young kitchen boy, no older than 10, being struck by the head servant for spilling a bowl of stew. He doesn't cry out, he just takes it, his eyes blank with a learned resignation. You realize that this is what they want from you: silent, unquestioning obedience. The master's word is law, and there is no court of appeal. If he is displeased, he can order any punishment he sees fit, from a simple beating to a more creative and more terrifying form of torture. You hear whispers from the other servants about a slave who was branded for trying to escape. The story is told in hushed, terrified tones, a cautionary tale designed to keep you in line. You realize that your life, your body, your very existence is entirely at the mercy of a single man. This is a level of powerlessness you never could have imagined. This arbitrary and often brutal form of punishment was a core historical fact of medieval slavery. There were often no legal protections for slaves, and a master's power over their property was nearly absolute. This lack of legal recourse was a fundamental part of the system. Historians still argue whether the fear of punishment was a more effective tool of control than the promise of a small reward, but for you, the constant dread is a terrifying reality. Every time a door slams or a voice is raised, your heart jumps into your throat. A particularly cruel aspect of this was how the fear was used to turn slaves against one another. A master might offer a small reward, an extra portion of food, a new blanket to the servant who reported a wrongdoing. It was a way to sow distrust and to prevent any kind of solidarity among the slaves. You learn to be careful with your words, to be wary of who you trust. The other slaves, your fellow captives, are no longer a source of potential friendship, but a source of potential danger. It's a lonely and isolating existence, a life lived in constant suspicion. You are carrying a heavy bucket of water, your arms trembling with the effort. You stumble, and a little bit of the water sloshes over the side, leaving a small dark stain on the polished floor. Your heart leaps into your throat. You look around frantically, your eyes searching for the head servant. She is not there. You quickly get a rag and try to wipe up the stain, but it's too late. A servant, one of the older, more cynical ones, sees what you've done. She gives you a small, conspiratorial smile, a smile that is far more terrifying than a frown. She saw your mistake, and she now has power over you. She can report you to the head servant, or she can hold it over your head for a later date. You realize that you've just become a pawn in a game you don't even understand, and the stakes are your life. You are a victim of not just the master's cruelty, but the cruelty of the system itself. Your body, once a machine of comfort and leisure, is now a testament to deprivation. The food is thin and meager, just enough to keep you on your feet. You are given a bowl of watery stew, a few vegetables, and a hunk of hard bread twice a day. There are no spices, no variety, and no warmth. You eat in a corner, a silent ghost, and you learn to swallow your pride along with the tasteless gruel. Your body, a remarkable machine of adaptation, starts to change. You lose weight, your face becomes gaunt, and your muscles, once soft, begin to ache with a constant low-grade protest. You are living proof that the human body can endure a surprising amount of hardship, but you are also living proof that it can break. Your living conditions are no better. You sleep on a straw pallet in a small, cramped room with 2 other servants. The room is cold in the winter and hot in the summer, with no windows and a single door. There's no privacy, no space for yourself. The room smells of unwashed bodies and damp earth, a constant reminder of your new status. There are rats that scurry in the corners, and fleas that bite you in your sleep. You're a prisoner in this house, and your cell is a testament to the master's indifference. He gives you just enough to survive, but not enough to live. This level of deprivation was a core historical fact for many slaves in the medieval era. Masters were not interested in the well-being of their property, but in their productivity. A slave who was well-fed and well-rested was a luxury, not a necessity. This was a purely economic decision. Historians still argue whether the meager rations were a form of cruelty or a simple reflection of the harsh economic realities of the time. But for you, it's all the same. It's a constant, gnawing hunger that you will likely never escape. An intriguing insight into these living conditions is how the slaves found small, clever ways to improve their lot. They might find a few scraps of wood to build a small shelf, or they might hide a piece of cloth to use as a pillow. These were small acts of defiance, tiny rebellions against a system that sought to strip them of every last bit of comfort. You see a small, carved wooden bird on the shelf of one of your roommates, and you realize it's not a decoration, but a symbol of a small, hidden hope, a tiny flicker of humanity in a dark world. It's a secret, a piece of art that belongs to a person, not a slave. And you realize that your own survival will depend on finding these small, hidden acts of rebellion. You lie on your straw pallet, your body aching and your stomach rumbling. The room is dark and silent, save for the quiet breathing of your roommates and the scurrying of rats. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you try to remember a time when you ate a hot, delicious meal in a clean, warm room. You try to remember the taste of the food, the feeling of a full stomach. But the memory is fading, a beautiful ghost that is slowly, surely slipping away. All that is left is the cold, hard reality of your new life. You are hungry, and you are alone. Cleanliness is a luxury you can no longer afford. The lack of basic hygiene and sanitation is a constant, low-grade torture that wears you down both physically and mentally. You are given a small bowl of cold water once a day to wash your hands and face, and that's it. Your body, your clothes, your living space, they are all a testament to the indifference of a world that doesn't care if you are clean or dirty. You learn to live with the constant smell of sweat and unwashed bodies, a scent that is both a part of you and a constant reminder of your new, degraded status. The water you drink is not clean. It's drawn from a well that is likely shared with livestock, and it has a strange metallic taste. You're told not to drink too much, to save it for the master's family. You see a small boy, one of the other slaves, with a terrible, hacking cough, and you wonder if it's from the water. You're terrified of getting sick, of being too weak to work, because you know with a gut-wrenching certainty that a sick slave is a useless slave and a useless slave is a dead slave. You're living in a world where disease and infection are not just possibilities, they are inevitabilities. This profound lack of sanitation was a core historical fact of the medieval world, especially for the lower classes and slaves. The concept of hygiene as we know it today simply didn't exist. This was a world of open sewers, shared water sources, and rampant disease. Historians still argue whether the high mortality rate of slaves was due more to harsh living conditions or to the constant exposure to communicable diseases. For you, the difference is purely academic. You're just trying to get through the day without getting sick. One of the more unsettling facts about the lack of hygiene was the presence of vermin. Rats, mice, fleas, and lice were a constant reality. They were everywhere, in your sleeping quarters, in the kitchens, in the master's own home. You learn to live with the constant, low-grade irritation of flea bites and the rustling of rats in the walls. They are a part of your new life, a constant, physical reminder of your degradation. You are not a human being anymore. You are just another animal in the master's house, sharing your space with the vermin. It's a bitter pill to swallow, a final, terrible blow to your dignity. You're given a small piece of soap, a hard, yellow bar that smells of lye, and you're told to scrub the master's clothes. You work at it, your hands raw and red from the cold water and the harsh soap. You're not just cleaning the clothes, you're scrubbing away a part of yourself. You're scrubbing away your old life, your old identity. You are a tool, a cleaning device, and your purpose is to serve. You look at your reflection in the water, a dirty, smudged face with tired eyes, and you barely recognize yourself. The person you were is a ghost, a beautiful memory, and the person you are is a silent, unwashed servant, a shadow moving through a world that has no place for you. You are a prisoner of not just your master, but of a world that has no use for your comfort or your dignity. You are a dirty, nameless thing, and you are terrified. The other slaves, your fellow captives, are not what you expected. You thought you would find a kind of camaraderie, a shared misery that would bind you together. But that's not what you find. You find a world of quiet suspicion, of guarded glances and unspoken rules. The head servant, Elara, has created an environment of fear and distrust, a place where solidarity is a dangerous dream. You are all in the same boat, a sinking one, but you are all rowing in different directions, trying to save yourselves. You realize that a master's best tool of control is not a whip, but a sense of profound isolation. You see a young woman, a house servant who looks to be your age, watching you from across the courtyard. She gives you a small, almost imperceptible nod, a flicker of empathy. You're drawn to her, a small spark of hope in a dark world. But then you see another servant, an older man with a hardened face, give her a sharp look. She quickly turns away, her face a mask of indifference. You understand, kindness is a luxury they cannot afford. Trust is a dangerous game, and the penalty for losing is too high. You are all survivors, and survivors, you learn, don't have friends. They have allies, and even those are temporary. This fractured social dynamic was a core historical fact of slavery in many parts of the medieval world. Masters often deliberately sowed discord among their slaves to prevent any kind of organized resistance. This was a psychological strategy of control. Historians still argue whether the lack of solidarity among slaves was more a result of this intentional manipulation or a natural consequence of a brutal system of survival. For you, it's a profound and lonely reality. You are surrounded by people, but you have never felt so alone. A poignant detail about these communities is the way they used storytelling and song to maintain a sense of shared identity and culture. In the dark of the night, when the master and his family were asleep, you might hear a quiet, mournful song coming from the servants' quarters. It would be a song in a language you don't understand, but the sadness in the notes is a universal language. It's a song about a homeland they will never see again, a song about a family they have lost. You don't understand the words, but you understand the feeling. It's a small, beautiful act of defiance, a way for them to hold on to a part of themselves that the master could never own. You're given a chore, a simple task of carrying water to the kitchen. The water bucket is heavy, and your hands are raw from the constant labor. You pass by the old man who gave the young woman a sharp look earlier. He doesn't look at you, doesn't acknowledge your presence. You are a ghost, a thing that carries water. You feel a wave of intense loneliness, a primal human need for connection that is being denied to you. You remember your old life, your friends, the easy laughter and the shared stories. You try to hold on to those memories, to nurture them, but they feel so far away. You are a ghost, and your only companions are other ghosts, shadows of people who have lost everything. You are a survivor, and you are completely and utterly alone. You realize that this, more than any physical punishment, is the true cruelty of slavery. The idea of escape is a whisper, a dangerous thought that slithers into your mind in the dark of night. You see a break in the fence, a moment when the guards aren't looking, a path that leads to a dense forest. But you quickly suppress the thought. It's not a path to freedom, it's a path to a more brutal end. You've seen what happens to those who try. A young man, a field slave, tried to run a few weeks ago. He was caught, of course. His punishment was a public spectacle, a brutal and bloody lesson for the rest of you. He was beaten, his skin a canvas of red and purple welts, and then he was branded on the face, a permanent, indelible mark of his crime. He is still here, a broken man who now moves with the slow, defeated shuffle of a ghost. This is the reality of escape. It's not the glorious, heroic dash to freedom you see in stories. It's a desperate, often futile act that ends in a more terrible form of servitude or death. The masters, you realize, have all the advantages. They have guards, dogs, and a community of free people who are all too willing to turn in a runaway slave for a small reward. This is a system designed to be inescapable, a cage with no lock and no key. The only way out, you realize, is a coffin. The futility of escape was a core historical fact of medieval slavery. The legal and social systems were all stacked against the slave. A slave who escaped was an outlaw, a person with no rights and no protections. This was a world without the kind of organized abolitionist movements or safe houses that would later emerge. Historians still argue whether the slave's greatest deterrent was the fear of punishment or the complete lack of a place to go after a successful escape. For you, the difference is moot, the risk is too high, and the reward is a fantasy. A sobering observation is how the master used the failed escape attempts as a tool of control. They were not a source of embarrassment or a sign of a failing system. They were a teaching moment. The public punishments, the branding, the broken spirit of the failed escapee, these were all a deliberate and brutal form of propaganda, a way to remind you and the others that resistance is futile. You are a prisoner of not just a master, but a master's fear, and your only job is to be a silent, obedient tool. You learn to turn a blind eye to the suffering of others, to become a rock in a river of pain. It's a defense mechanism, a way to protect your own fragile sanity. You're carrying a large, heavy sack of grain from the barn to the kitchen. The weight of it digs into your shoulders, and your back is screaming in protest. You pass by the old man who was branded for trying to escape. He looks at you, his eyes blank, his face a canvas of defeat. He doesn't speak, but his look is a warning. Don't even think about it, he seems to be saying. It's not worth it. You nod almost imperceptibly, a silent acknowledgement of his suffering and a silent promise to yourself that you will not follow in his footsteps. You will survive. You will not become a broken, branded ghost. You will just survive. You are a pragmatist now, a person who has learned to trade hope for a cold, hard dose of reality. You are a survivor, and that is all you are. You're a ghost in your own home, a thing that cleans and carries, but your new legal and social status is a far more brutal reality. You have no rights. None. The master can do anything he wants to you, and there is no law, no court, and no authority that will protect you. You are not a person in the eyes of the law. You are property. Your existence is not a matter of rights and responsibilities, but of ownership. You can be bought, sold, traded, or given away as a gift. You are a tool, and your only purpose is to serve the needs and whims of your master. This lack of legal standing is a terrifying thing. You remember a world where you had rights, where you could appeal to a court, where you could speak and be heard. That world is gone. You realize that a free man who strikes you will not be punished for assault. He will be punished for damaging the master's property. Your body is not yours, it is a commodity, and its value is purely economic. This is a profound and fundamental shift in your understanding of the world. Your humanity has been revoked, and a cold, legalistic definition of your existence has taken its place. This profound lack of legal status was a core historical fact of medieval slavery. In many legal systems, from the Roman Empire's legal codes that endured to the Islamic Golden Age's treatises on property, a slave was not considered a person under the law. They were movable property, or chattel. This was a fundamental pillar of the institution. Historians still argue whether the legal status of slaves in the medieval era was more or less severe than that of their ancient counterparts, but the bottom line for you is that you have no legal existence. Your voice is silent, and your rights are non-existent. A telling insight into this legal vacuum is how disputes were handled. If you, a slave, were to accuse a free man of a crime, your testimony would not be considered valid. It would be an unheard voice, a meaningless accusation. You are a ghost in a courtroom. Your word holds no weight, and your truth is an irrelevance. The only person who can speak for you is your master, and his testimony will be based not on your well-being but on his own economic interests. This is a world where justice is for the free, and you are not. You're working in the master's study again, dusting the heavy, leather-bound books. You see a large legal text, a thick tome filled with the laws of the land. You can't read the words, but you understand the meaning. This book, this symbol of order and justice, is not for you. It's a book for the free, a book for the people who own you. You are a person outside the law, a person who exists in a legal grey area that is more akin to an animal than a human being. The weight of this realization is heavy, a physical and emotional burden that is more crushing than any sack of grain. You are not a person, but a thing without a voice, without rights, and without a place in the eyes of a cold, indifferent law. This is your new truth, a truth more brutal than any punishment. You have a secret. It's not something you can see or touch, but it's a part of you that has survived the journey, the market, and the daily grind of your new life. You possess a skill, a craft, a knowledge that the average person in this world does not. Maybe you were a scribe in your old life, or a musician, a weaver, or a metalsmith. Whatever it is, it's a part of you that the master could never truly own. And in this world of brute labor and constant suffering, that skill might be the only thing that separates you from a life of utter destitution. The head servant, Ilara, notices your hands. They're not the rough, calloused hands of a field worker. They're softer, more dexterous, and they move with a kind of practiced grace when you're given a task that requires a little more finesse. She sees you mending a torn piece of cloth, your fingers working a needle with an almost surgical precision, and a look of surprise flashes across her face. She sees not a servant, but a tool with a specialized function, a function that could be more valuable than a strong back. You realize, with a sudden, terrifying clarity, that your secret is out, and it's not a secret anymore. The value of specialized skills in a slave was a core historical fact of medieval society. Slaves with a unique skill were often highly prized and could fetch a much higher price at market. They were not just a source of labor, but a source of income, a way for the master to earn money or prestige. This was a fundamental part of the global economy, and the skills of a single slave could make a master a very rich man. Historians still argue whether a skilled slave had more or less freedom than an unskilled one, but for you, the difference is moot. You are still a slave, but you are a more valuable one. Another fascinating element of this dynamic was how a master might treat a skilled slave differently. You might be given a better portion of food, a slightly cleaner living space, or even a different set of clothes. It's not a reward for good behavior, it's an investment. The master is protecting his asset, making sure that you are healthy and able to perform your valuable work. You are no longer just a piece of property, you are a prized possession. This is a strange and terrifying form of recognition, a sign that your humanity is still a currency, but a currency that is owned by someone else. You are given a new task, a task that separates you from the other servants. You are taken to a small room, a dusty workspace filled with tools you recognize from your old life. The master, a man who has never looked at you before, now looks at you with a kind of calculating interest. He gives you a small, broken music box and, with a series of gestures, he tells you to fix it. You take the box, your fingers tracing the intricate carvings, and for a moment, you feel a flicker of your old self. You are no longer a ghost. You are a craftsman. You are still a slave, but you are a slave with a purpose that gives you a strange and dangerous kind of power. You are not a human being, but you are not a mindless tool either. You are a person with a skill, and that skill might be the only thing that can save you, or the very thing that destroys you. Not all slaves are created equal. You've seen the brute laborers, the domestic servants, and now you have a glimmer of understanding of another, more terrifying category, the luxury slaves. You're working on the master's music box, your hands moving with a practiced grace, and you see them. They are not like you. They are dressed in finer clothes, their skin is paler, and they move with a kind of practiced, ethereal grace. They are beautiful, in a way that is both captivating and profoundly sad. They are not here to work. They are here to be seen. They are a status symbol, a living, breathing testament to the master's wealth and power. You see a young woman, a luxury slave, walking through the courtyard. Her hair is beautifully braided, and her face is painted with delicate cosmetics. She doesn't speak to anyone, doesn't acknowledge your presence. She is a ghost, a piece of art that moves through the house. Her life, you realize, is a different kind of prison. She is not beaten or starved, but her existence is defined by her beauty and her ability to please. She is an object of desire, a human ornament, and her purpose is to be beautiful, to be silent, and to be owned. This is a level of dehumanization that is both subtle and profound. You are a tool, but she is a decoration. This market for exotic and luxury slaves was a core historical fact of the medieval world, especially in the royal courts and wealthy households of the Byzantine and Islamic empires. A beautiful slave, a slave with a unique talent for music or poetry, or a slave from a distant, exotic land, was a highly prized possession. They were a sign of the master's wealth and prestige, a way for him to show off his power. Historians still argue whether the lives of these luxury slaves were more or less comfortable than those of their laboring counterparts. But for you, the difference is moot. They are still slaves, and their cages, while gilded, are still cages. A disturbing insight into this world is how a luxury slave's value was not just in their physical appearance, but in their exoticism. A slave from a distant land, a land with a different skin color or a different language, was a source of fascination and prestige. They were a conversation starter, a curiosity, a symbol of the master's global reach. They were not seen as a person with a story, but as a living souvenir, a piece of a foreign land that could be owned and displayed. It's a bitter pill to swallow, this commodification of a person's entire identity, their very being reduced to a curiosity. You're still working on the music box, your hands moving with a kind of focused intensity. You're a craftsman, a person with a purpose, and that purpose is your only comfort. You look at the luxury slave again, and you feel a strange sense of empathy. Her cage, while prettier than yours, is no less of a prison. You realize that there is no good way to be a slave. There is no such thing as a better form of servitude. You are a tool, and she is a decoration, but you are both owned. You are both objects in a world that has no use for your humanity. You turn back to your work, the intricate gears of the music box, a welcome distraction from the brutal reality of your situation. You are a slave, but for now you are also a craftsman, and that, you realize, is a small, precious rebellion. The master's house is a world of quiet cruelty, and you're beginning to understand that the most effective tool of control isn't the whip, but the mind game. The master and his family don't just command you, they manipulate you. They'll praise you for a job well done, a small, fleeting compliment that makes you feel a tiny spark of pride. But that praise is a trap. It makes you work harder. It makes you want more, and it makes you dependent on their approval. It's a way to keep you docile, to keep you striving for a kindness that is never truly yours. They'll give you a slightly larger portion of food, a slightly softer blanket, a small reward for being the good slave. It's a way to turn you against your fellow captives, a way to make you feel like you are better than them, and to make them resent you. It's a brilliant, terrible system of psychological manipulation. You see the other slaves playing this game too. They'll try to outdo each other, to work harder, to be more obedient, all for a small, fleeting bit of recognition. They are all desperate for a crumb of kindness, a moment of human connection, and the master knows it. He doles it out in small, measured doses, a drug that keeps you hooked and keeps you obedient. You realize that a master who is overtly cruel is, in a way, easier to deal with. His cruelty is a constant, a known quantity. But a master who is kind, a master who plays these mind games, is a far more dangerous foe. He is a predator who preys on your humanity. This use of psychological manipulation was a core historical fact of slavery in many parts of the medieval world. Masters were not just interested in your labor, they were interested in your will. They wanted to break you, to make you into a compliant, unquestioning tool. This was a deliberate strategy of control. Historians still argue whether this psychological abuse was more damaging to the slave's psyche than the physical abuse, but for you, the difference is moot. You are a person who is being deliberately and meticulously broken. A fascinating element of this was the use of shame and humiliation. You might be forced to wear a certain color of tunic, or to stand in a certain corner of the room, or to eat your food from a certain bowl. These were all subtle, but powerful, ways to remind you of your place in the household. They were not physical punishments, but they were a constant, low-grade assault on your dignity. You are made to feel less than, to feel small, to feel worthless. And it works. You start to believe it. You start to see yourself the way they see you, as a worthless, disposable tool. You're sweeping the master's study, your mind a whirlwind of these terrible thoughts. The master calls to you, his voice surprisingly gentle. He tells you that your work is good, that you are a hard worker, and he gives you a small piece of cheese from his own plate. It's a small, kind gesture, but you feel a wave of intense suspicion. You don't trust him. You can't. You take the cheese, your fingers trembling slightly, and you give a small, respectful bow. You say nothing. You are a ghost, a silent figure who takes the cheese but not the lie. You have learned your lesson. You are not a person to him. You are an object to be manipulated, and you will not fall for his game. You are a survivor, and survivors, you have learned, don't have masters who are kind. They have masters who are smart. In the dark of night, when the master and his family are asleep and the house is quiet, you are left with your own thoughts. And in that silence, you find yourself grappling with a new, unexpected reality, the role of religion and faith in this world. The master and his family are devout. They pray before every meal. They go to a large stone church on the Sabbath, and they talk about God with a kind of reverent familiarity that is both comforting and deeply alien. You, a person from a different world, are left to wonder, is their God a God of mercy? Or is he a God who condones this terrible institution, a God who sees you not as a person, but as a tool? You see the other slaves praying too. They pray in the dark of night. Their voices a low, mournful hum. They are not praying to the master's God, but to their own. They are praying to a God of their homeland, a God who feels closer, a God who understands their pain. Their faith is a lifeline, a way to maintain a small bit of their identity in a world that has taken everything else. You watch them, and you feel a sense of profound longing. You have no God, no faith, no higher power to appeal to. You are a person alone in a world of believers, and that, you realize, is a special kind of loneliness. The role of religion in the lives of both masters and slaves was a core historical fact of the medieval world. From the Christian and Islamic empires to the pagan societies of the North, religion was an integral part of life. For masters, religion was often used to justify slavery, with certain religious texts being interpreted as condoning the practice. For slaves, religion was often a source of solace, a way to maintain hope in a seemingly hopeless world. Historians still argue whether the solace of religion was a form of true comfort or a kind of psychological tool that kept slaves from rebelling. For you, the difference is moot. You are a person without a God, and you feel a profound and all-consuming sense of spiritual isolation. A fascinating element of this dynamic was how some slaves, when converted to their master's religion, would find a new kind of community. They would go to the same church, they would pray the same prayers, and they would be seen, in the eyes of their fellow believers, as a person, if only for a brief moment. This was not a path to freedom, but it was a path to a different kind of life, a life with a small bit of human connection. You think about this, about the possibility of finding a community in your master's religion, but you quickly dismiss the thought. You cannot, you realize, embrace a God who allows this kind of suffering. Your soul, if you have one, is your own, and you will not give it away for a moment of false comfort. You're walking through the courtyard, the sun a hot white orb in a cloudless sky. You pass a small makeshift shrine that one of the other slaves has built. It's a collection of small stones and a few withered flowers, a tribute to a god you don't know. You look at it, and you feel a pang of something you can't quite name. It's not a feeling of mockery or disdain. It's a feeling of longing, a profound human need for a sense of purpose, a sense of meaning in a meaningless world. You are a person without a God, a person without a faith, and you are adrift. You are a survivor, but you are a survivor with a hollow place inside you, a place that used to be filled with hope and a sense of a higher purpose. That place is now empty, and it is the quietest, most brutal part of your new life. The seasons are no longer a backdrop to your life. They are a dictator of your work. As the autumn winds grow colder, your workload shifts. You're no longer fetching water from a warm well. You're chopping firewood, your hands raw and numb from the cold. The master's house must be kept warm, and your body is the engine that provides that warmth. You're hauling heavy logs, your back screaming in protest, your breath a white cloud in the cold air. The sun, once a hot, merciless orb, is now a pale, distant source of light that offers no warmth. The days grow shorter, and your work, it seems, grows harder. The change of seasons brings with it a change in the atmosphere of the house. The master's family huddles around a large fireplace, drinking hot spiced wine, their faces rosy with warmth. You see them, and you feel a profound sense of isolation. You are a silent ghost, a person whose entire purpose is to provide the warmth that they enjoy. You are outside, in the cold, a thing that brings wood to the fire. This is a level of separation that is both physical and emotional, a brutal reminder of your place in this world. The changing seasons and their impact on the workload of slaves was a core historical fact of medieval society. From the fields to the household, the work was dictated by the rhythm of nature. A slave's life was a cycle of relentless labor, from the planting and harvesting of crops to the chopping of firewood and the mending of clothes. This was not a life of leisure or choice. It was a life of necessity. Historians still argue whether the winter months were more or less brutal for slaves than the summer, but for you, the cold is a constant, physical reminder of your own vulnerability. A bitter irony of this situation is how your body, once a source of comfort and pleasure, is now a tool for survival. You're grateful for your strength, for your ability to endure the cold and the endless labor, but you're also resentful of it. You're resentful that your body, a thing that is a part of you, is now a tool that is owned by someone else. You're a machine, and your only purpose is to work. You see your hands, red and chapped from the cold, and you barely recognize them. They are not the hands of a person anymore. They are the hands of a slave, a person whose entire existence is defined by the work they can do. You're chopping a log, your arms and shoulders burning with a dull ache. You swing the axe again and again, the sound a steady, rhythmic thud. You are a machine, and you are working. You are not a person anymore. You are a thing that chops wood. You think about your old life, about the quiet comforts of a warm room and a soft bed. You remember a time when the seasons were a source of joy, a time of different clothes and different foods, but that time is gone. Your new life is a cycle of labor, and the seasons are a reminder of your place in a cold, indifferent world. You are a person who is no longer a person. You are a machine, and you will work until you break. The one thing you can never truly escape is the constant, low-grade fear of being sold again. It's a gnawing anxiety that sits in the pit of your stomach, a cold, metallic taste in your mouth. You've seen it happen. A slave who makes a mistake, a slave who falls ill, a slave who is no longer useful, is simply sold. You are not a person with a permanent home. You are a piece of property that can be transferred, traded, or given away at a moment's notice. The master's kindness is a fleeting thing. His benevolence is not a reflection of his character, but a temporary economic decision. If a better offer comes along, you will be sold. If you become a liability, you will be sold. Your future is a constant state of flux, a constant state of terror. You see a family, a mother, a father, and a small child being led away from the house. They are not leaving on their own terms. They are being sold. The mother is weeping, a silent, heartbroken sob that tears at your soul. The father's face is a mask of impotent rage and despair. The child, a small boy, is holding his mother's hand, his eyes wide with a confusion you know all too well. They are being separated, you realize. The father is going to one master, the mother and child to another. The family unit, the most basic form of human connection, is a fragile thing in this world, a thing that can be broken with a single word. You realize that your own survival depends on your profound and terrible aloneness. This constant fear of being sold was a core historical fact of medieval slavery. A slave's life was a precarious existence, and the threat of being separated from loved ones was a powerful tool of control. This was a system designed to keep you in a state of constant fear and uncertainty. Historians still argue whether the economic incentives for selling slaves were more or less powerful than the social stigma of being a cruel master. But for you, the master's reputation is of no concern. He is a person who can and will sell you if it suits his interests. A particularly cruel aspect of this was how a master might use this fear as a tool of psychological torture. He might make a joke about selling you, a brief, sharp jab that sends a shiver down your spine. He might talk to a guest about your value, a conversation you are forced to listen to, a conversation that reminds you that you are a piece of property. He might even pretend to sell you, a cruel charade that is designed to break your will and to remind you of your powerlessness. You are a human being, but you are also a toy, a thing that can be played with, a thing that can be broken. You're sweeping the courtyard, your mind a whirlwind of these terrible thoughts. You see the master talking to a man you don't recognize, a man with a cold, calculating look in his eyes. They're looking at you. They're talking about you. You can feel it, a cold dread that spreads from your stomach to the tips of your fingers. You try to look away, but you can't. Your eyes are fixed on them, your heart pounding a frantic rhythm against your ribs. You are a person whose fate is being decided in a language you don't understand, by people who don't know your name. You are a ghost, and your only purpose is to be a silent spectator in your own life. You are a survivor, but you are a survivor who is living on borrowed time. In a world defined by cruelty and indifference, the fleeting moments of kindness are a dangerous kind of miracle. You're fetching water from the well, a chore you do on autopilot, your mind a blank slate of exhaustion. The old woman who cooks for the master's family, a woman with a face like a roadmap of wrinkles and eyes that have seen too much, sees your struggle. She doesn't say anything. She just gives you a small, almost imperceptible nod, and a small, soft piece of bread she has tucked away in her apron. It's a simple act, a small piece of food that will be gone in a moment. But it's a gesture that speaks volumes. It's a moment of human connection, a brief, fleeting reminder that you are not a thing but a person. The bread is stale, but it's the most delicious thing you've ever tasted. You eat it in a corner, your eyes closed, and for a moment, you are not a slave. You are a person who is eating a piece of bread that was given to you with kindness. You hold on to that feeling, that small, fragile spark of hope. But then you remember the head servant, Ilara, and the other slaves who watch you with a quiet suspicion. You quickly eat the rest of the bread, a frantic, desperate act, and you pretend that nothing happened. You can't afford to be seen as a favorite, and you can't afford to be seen as weak. Kindness, you realize, is a dangerous thing. It makes you vulnerable, and vulnerability is a luxury you can no longer afford. These fleeting moments of kindness were a core historical fact of slavery in the medieval world. Not all masters were monsters, and not all fellow slaves were betrayers. There were small, human gestures that cut through the darkness, acts of rebellion against a system designed to strip you of your humanity. This was a fragile but powerful kind of resistance. Historians still argue whether these small acts of kindness were more a sign of human decency or a form of self-preservation, a way for people to maintain a small bit of their own humanity in a world that had none. For you, the difference is moot. It was a moment of grace, a moment you will hold on to for as long as you can. An emotionally resonant aspect of these moments was how they often came from the most unexpected places. It might be a child of the master, a small, innocent face who gives you a small toy or a piece of candy. The child doesn't see you as a slave. They see you as a person who is sad. It's a brief moment of pure, unadulterated human connection, a moment that is both beautiful and deeply painful. You can't return the kindness. You can't speak to the child, you can't play with them, and you can't let yourself be seen as a friend, because that would be a danger to both of you. You're walking through the courtyard, the sun a hot, white orb in a cloudless sky. You pass a small, beautiful flower that is growing in a crack in the stone. You stop for a moment, your eyes fixed on its delicate petals. It's a small, beautiful thing in a world of dust and cruelty. You reach out your hand, and you touch it. A brief, gentle touch. It's a moment of connection with something beautiful, something alive, something that is not a slave. You don't pick it. You just touch it, a small, silent act of defiance. You are a person who can appreciate beauty, a person who can feel a sense of wonder, and that, you realize, is a small, precious rebellion. You are not a ghost, and you are not a tool. You are a person, and you will hold on to that truth for as long as you can. The person you were, a person with a name and a past and a life, is now a distant memory. Your body, once a source of comfort and a tool for pleasure, is now a testament to endurance and a canvas for pain. The physical scars are a constant reminder of the beatings, the long marches, the brutal, unrelenting labor. But the emotional scars are deeper, more insidious. Your mind, once a place of dreams and ideas, is now a fortress of fear and suspicion. Your spirit, once a source of hope and ambition, is now a quiet, hardened thing, a thing that has learned to survive by simply not feeling. You see your hands, and you barely recognize them. They are no longer soft and unblemished. They are calloused and rough, a testament to a life of labor. You feel the constant, low-grade ache in your back and your shoulders, a protest from a body that has been pushed to its limits. You are no longer a person who wakes up and feels rested. You are a person who wakes up and feels the weight of the previous day's labor. You are a person who lives with a constant, dull protest from your own body. This is your new reality, a reality of physical and emotional exhaustion. The long-term effects of slavery on the human body and mind were a core historical fact of the medieval world. From malnutrition and disease to the physical trauma of beatings and the psychological trauma of constant fear, a slave's life was a brutal and destructive thing. This was a life of constant suffering, a life that took a terrible toll on the human body and mind. Historians still argue whether the physical or psychological damage was more profound, but for you the difference is moot. You are a person who has been permanently scarred by your ordeal, a person who will never truly be whole again. A particularly cruel aspect of this was how your own body, a thing you once took for granted, is now a source of both pain and fear. A small cut, a fever, a limp, Any of these things could be a death sentence. Your body is not a machine for survival. It is a liability. You are forced to push through the pain, to hide your injuries, to pretend that you are stronger than you are. You are a person who is living with a constant, primal fear that your own body will betray you. You are a person who is forced to live in a state of constant, low-grade terror. You're walking through the courtyard, the sun a hot white orb in a cloudless sky. You pass a small broken mirror on the ground, a discarded piece of glass that reflects your image. You stop, your eyes fixed on your own reflection. You see a gaunt, dirty face with eyes that are older than they should be. You see a face that is a testament to suffering, a face that is no longer your own. You see a ghost, a shadow of the person you once were. You feel a wave of intense sadness, a profound sense of loss, a feeling that your old life is gone forever. You want to weep, to let the tears flow, but you can't. You are a slave. You are a person who has forgotten how to cry. You turn away from the mirror, and you continue your work. You are a person who is a ghost in their own life, a person who has been permanently and irrevocably broken. The tragic truth of your new life is that your story will never be told. You are a ghost, a shadow, a person without a name, and your life will not be recorded in the annals of history. The master's family will have a lineage, a family tree that stretches back for generations, a history of triumphs and tragedies, but you will not. You are a nameless face in a sea of nameless faces, a footnote in a history that is not your own. Your suffering, your endurance, your quiet, heartbreaking strength, none of it will be remembered. You will simply be a line in a ledger, a number on a sales contract, a piece of property that was bought and sold. Your life, in the grand scheme of things, is an irrelevance. This profound lack of historical record is a core historical fact of slavery throughout the medieval world. The stories of individual slaves were not considered important enough to be recorded. They were not people with a history, they were property with a price. The vast majority of what we know about slavery comes from the records of the masters, their ledgers, their wills, their letters. We see slaves as a number, a price, a line on a parchment. We don't see them as people, with hopes and fears and dreams. Historians still argue whether the anonymity of slaves was a deliberate act of historical erasure or a simple reflection of the social norms of the time, but for you the difference is moot. Your story, you realize, will die with you. A profoundly sad insight into this is how we are left to piece together the lives of slaves from these fragments. A single line in a will might say, "I bequeath to my son a silver chalice and 2 slaves." That's all we have. 2 people, 2 human beings with a lifetime of stories and sorrows are reduced to a piece of property, a commodity. We don't know their names, their families, or their history. We just know their price. It's a sobering thought. This historical silence, this vast, echoing emptiness where the stories of countless human beings should be. You're sweeping the master's study, the room filled with heavy books and dusty parchments. These are the records of the master's life, his business dealings, his family history, his land holdings. This is a room of history, but it is not your history. You are a silent ghost in a room full of words that are not for you. You are a witness to a history that is not your own, a history that has no place for you. You feel a wave of intense loneliness, a profound and all-consuming sadness that your life, your beautiful, heartbreaking life, will be forgotten. You are a person who is living in a world that has already forgotten you. You look at a small, beautiful book, a book of poetry with intricate illustrations. You can't read the words, but you understand the feeling. It's a book about love and loss, about beauty and sorrow. It's a book about the human experience. But it is not your book. You are a person who is living a life of sorrow, but a life that will never be written. You are a person who will be a ghost in your own history, a person whose story will be a whisper on the wind, a sound that no one will ever hear. You are a survivor, but you are a survivor whose story will be lost to the ages. That, you realize, is the final, most brutal cruelty of your new life. Your journey has brought you here, to the end of a long, terrible day. You are a person who has survived the auction block, the brutal journey, the constant threat of punishment, and the quiet, insidious cruelty of your master's mind games. You are a person who has learned to live without hope, without a name, and without a story. But your journey is not just your own. It is a mirror, a reflection of a brutal historical reality that has cast a long shadow on the world you came from. The echoes of this history are all around you. The idea of people as property, the commodification of human beings, the brutal systems of control, they are all a part of a larger story, a story that still impacts us today. The poverty, the racism, the social injustices that plague your modern world, they all have their roots in this soil of human degradation. You are not just a person who has survived a day in a medieval slave market. You are a person who has walked through a piece of history, a history that is still very much alive. This long shadow of slavery is a core historical fact. The social, economic, and political systems that were built on the backs of slaves did not simply disappear when the institution of slavery was abolished. They evolved. The wealth that was generated, the power that was consolidated, and the racial hierarchies that were established, they all continued to shape the world long after the last slave was freed. Historians still argue whether the legacy of slavery is more a matter of institutionalized racism or economic inequality. But for you, the difference is moot. You have seen, firsthand, how a system that treats people as property can break a person, and you know, with a profound and terrible certainty, that the scars of that system do not simply disappear with time. A final, poignant thought on this long journey is how the humanity of the enslaved continues to be a source of inspiration. The quiet rebellions, the small acts of kindness, the songs and the stories that were passed down in the dark of night, these were all acts of profound resistance, a way for people to maintain their humanity in a world that sought to strip it away. You, a person who has walked in their shoes, have seen that a person's dignity, their will to survive, their ability to find a small moment of beauty in a world of cruelty, is a thing that cannot be bought or sold. Now, as the sun sets and the house falls into a quiet, sleepy rhythm, you are left alone with your thoughts. The day is over. You have survived. But you are not the same person you were when it began. You are a person with a story that will never be told, but a story that is a part of a larger, more terrible truth. You are a person who has been changed by your journey, a person who has seen the darkest parts of the human experience, and you are, for now, alive. Slow the pacing, soften vocabulary, lengthen sentences, reassure the listener, fade the final imagery, and close on a calming whisper. And now, as the last light of a brutal sun fades from the sky, you can feel the heavy weight of the day begin to lift. The sounds of the household become muffled, the distant barking of a dog, the quiet murmur of a conversation that doesn't concern you. The air grows cool, a gentle balm on your weary skin. The darkness is not a source of fear now, but a blanket, a soft covering that promises a temporary peace, a brief, blessed oblivion from the endless toil. You can let go now. You have endured enough for one lifetime. You have walked this long, difficult path, and you have made it to the other side. The horrors of the day are fading into a distant, hazy memory, a dream that will soon be replaced by the quiet, comforting darkness of a world that is, for a little while, your own. It is time to rest.